No, you here. Doesn't matter? Okay. Yeah, I know. Instead of you walking all around, that's what I meant.
Doesn't matter.
Just trying to make it easier for you.
Make it.
Oh, I see.
All right, they're all set?
Oh,
Good evening and welcome to this evening's Planning Advisory Committee meeting of Thursday, January 26, 2023. I'll now call the meeting to order at 5:32. The second item on the agenda is the election of the chair. I have a recommendation in front of me that reads that Councillor Tracy Young be appointed as the chair of the Planning Advisory Committee for a term expiring on November 14th, 2026. Could I have a mover? Councillor Burton and a seconder? Mayor Shankar. I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. Thank you very much. Chair Young will now assume the seat.
Okay, so we'll now proceed with item 3, approval of the agenda, that the agenda for the Planning Advisory Committee meeting of January 26, 2023 be approved as presented. Do I have a mover and a seconder to adopt the agenda as presented?
I'll move it.
Councillor Burton? Seconder? Jason Copeland? All in favor? Motion carried. Item 4, are there any declarations of interest tonight? No, seeing none, we'll go to number 5, minutes of the meeting held November 2nd, 2022. Item 5 is a motion to approve the minutes of the previous meeting held on November 2nd, 2022. I have a recommendation that the Planning Advisory Committee minutes dated November 2nd, 2022 be accepted as presented. Can I have a mover? Burton and a seconder? Mayor Shankar? Is there any discussion on the minutes? Okay, all in favor? Number 6, agenda items, 6.1, staff report 01-2023, SPC 990. Item 6.1 is a staff report 01-2023 with a motion to approve the proposed site plan for 990 Edward Street. I have a recommendation that the Planning Advisory Committee recommend that council approve the proposed site plan application SPC 2021-05, subject to the following conditions. Number 1, the balance of any outstanding taxes, including penalties and interest, and any local improvement charges, if applicable, shall be paid to the town. Number 2, that a construction phasing plan that is acceptable to the town and addresses the parking for staff and contractors throughout the construction project. And number 3, that the site plan agreement of the lands shall be registered and be submitted to the town. Can I have a mover for the motion for discussion purposes? Mayor Shankar and a seconder? Jason Copeland? CAO Treasurer Matthew Armstrong will speak to the report.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. So what you have before you this evening is a site plan application for 990 Edward. Many of you might know it is the current site of Wellington House. And they will be growing, basically doubling in size from their current 60-some beds to 140. So, and I think this is the second redevelopment of the property. Originally, the building was on the front part of the property to the west, and the parking lot was where the current building is now. Then when it was redeveloped, it flipped towards to the east, and now it's going back the other way. With nursing homes in particular, and long-term care homes, you have to maintain the operations of the current home while you're building the new. It's not like you can move them all out and then be able to bring them back. So phasing is going to be an important part of how we move this forward, and in particular parking for the both staff and contractors. So we're working with the high school and have secured a number of spots there. We're also working with surrounding landowners to see if we can accommodate spots for them as well. So they're pretty sure they can accommodate all of the lay down of the materials for the on site. But parking, we'll have to work throughout the next month or so just to confirm where that's going to be. So you'll note in here that the total gross floor area is just about 86 or 8,700 square meters. And if you take a look, and what we have is a ratio of that floor area to the overall property. When we use gross area, that includes all the 4 floors. So if you just take the first floor, then you would actually only be at 0.21. So meaning that about a quarter of the property will be covered by a building. The rest of the property will be either open space or parking lot. Well, it's one thing that we're going to actually change going forward in our zoning bylaw. And when you take a look at the zoning bylaw, it allows for up to 50% coverage of the overall property. And this is only 21%. So we're able to address that too there. We did have WSP, who is our planning consultants for the town, take a look at the application. They went through the official plan as well as the zoning requirements. All of those have been met. We, in terms of the height of the building, we already went through committee of adjustment to obtain a minor variance for the overall height. So when we take a look at the site plan itself, you can see that the building will be oriented more towards Edward Street and will face onto Edward Street. Parking lot to the south side of the building that will then lead to the parking lot, and then there's kind of an open space area behind, leading over to Alexandra Street. Also in there is the landscaping plan. So to give an idea, all of that is governed by our official plan as well as our zoning bylaw. And so we wanted to make sure that we've addressed all of the landscaping needs and requirements. So there has been a change to the process when it comes to site plan control. Now the government has delegated it to staff as opposed to going through formal committee and council. And so what we're doing this evening is we want to follow the exact same process, gain the feedback from planning advisory as well as council, and make sure that we have the best possible plan as we move forward. We have 2 individuals with us this evening. Representing the developer, and they've been a pleasure to work with. We've been working on this for a little while now to get everything sorted out and making sure that all of the engineering plans match what we needed from the town perspective. And that's one thing that I also wanted to highlight is when town receives plans, we have them peer reviewed by our own engineers to make sure that what's being proposed meets what not only the building code requires, engineering plans require, but also making sure that it's not going to overtask our capacity when it comes to stormwater management, provision of water, as well as sanitary. So all of the plans that are submitted, we make sure we go through, make sure that they're vetted, and then are able to come to an agreement that the final ones are what we're able to move forward with. So more than happy to answer any questions. Also, our guest this evening here on behalf of Arch Capital is more than happy to answer any questions as well. Thank you.
Is there any discussion on 6.1?
If I may.
Yeah.
Matthew, this is my first on the planning advisory committee, so these questions may be crazy, but so the floor area ratio, can you explain that for me or somebody?
So in the official plan, it says that the floor area ratio should be about 0.25. But what we noticed when we went back through the plan is it measures it based on gross floor area. So the base of the building is about 27,000 square feet. But when you add all 4 floors, then it comes up to 93,000 square feet. The total size of the property is 128,000. So when you divide the 93 by 128, you're getting 0.73, which far exceeds 0.25. However, the formula really should be just based on the base, how much of the base or how much of the overall is being taken up. And so when you revise that calculation, and which is what the zoning bylaw requires, 0.21.
Gotcha.
It's the 0.73.
And 0.21 is 0.73 divided by 4?
No, so the ground floor has some areas that are slightly, that don't have second, third, and fourth floors to them. So it's slightly larger than the
Oh, I see.
total.
And I have one other question. The 72 parking spaces, is that 67 parking spaces and then 3 barrier-free spaces and 2 covered drop-off spaces?
Right.
Any other questions?
Yes, I have questions and concerns. The entrance, exit and entrance of this building, jumping onto Edward Street my concern is the increased amount of traffic the building is going to see, adding, probably doubling almost occupancy, which is obviously going to increase staff and visitors. Is there any way entrance and exits can be moved to Montgomery or, sorry, I'm not that familiar, or Alexander Crescent to move some of that traffic away from our kids off of Edward Street? Like, has a traffic study been done? I'm just concerned with the amount of kids that move up and down Edward Street on a daily basis going to school and increased traffic. And not that I want to be the snowbank guy, but snowbanks and the increased traffic with the arena being moved to that side of the city as well.
So I believe our plan actually makes the recommendation that the entrances for commercial and institutional should be off of Edward as opposed to residential streets. We don't necessarily want to have cars leading to commercial and industrial or institutional in this case on side streets. Particularly Montgomery is fairly narrow. So I wouldn't want to add additional to that, where Edward Street is that 4 lanes and can handle that additional traffic. Study was done and the recommendation was for it to come off of Edward.
Do you have any other questions, Jason?
No, that was my biggest concern with the project, is with the amount of children and traffic situation currently in Prescott. That's still a major concern of mine. I have a child that does attend the school and, near misses going to school. So that's why it's a busy area. You figure you got a new gas station going in there. Variety store, you got a Burger King, you got a Tim Hortons, you got the beer store, you got the school traffic in and out, and you've also got that industrial complex in behind that. To me, it's an overwhelming amount of intersections in one place. To me, it's just, this past summer, how many people were hit on Edward Street? Because people weren't, was it 2?
I'm aware of 1, and that was actually the individual's issue.
No, but that's what I'm saying, is that now we're going to increase traffic, and that's what I mean. It's a concern of mine, and I don't consider personally Montgomery Street as a residential street parked in behind retail establishments. I don't know. I just think it's something that could be considered.
Maybe that's something that the developer can speak to.
Hello.
Hi.
Hi, good evening. Ben Villani, VP of Development with Arch Corporation. Regarding the access, we've definitely been working with the planning staff for the ideal location. We've been taking guidance from them for where to locate the entrance. As we understand, because we've had discussions about Montgomery Road, it is quite narrow. It's basically 1 lane each way. I don't know if it's constructed to be used as the same as Edward Street is. From our standpoint, it makes the most sense to have access off Edward Street where our current access is. We are increasing the size of the home. The home is increasing, it's doubling in size, and that's to serve the needs in the local health network. As everyone's aware, long-term care right now in the province there's a huge shortage of beds. We're trying to help by adding additional beds to this community. And so it's a valid point, but as we understand, Edward Street is the main thoroughfare through Prescott. And from our standpoint, we also agree with planning staff that it does make the most sense for access in and out of the building.
Who do I have? Chair, Madam Chair, what about, like, can we put a stop sign? I can't tell from the picture, like before the sidewalk. Would that alleviate some concern? Do you know?
I don't know if it would alleviate concerns, as I've not to go away from, but you know, I live on James Street West and Center Street, probably two of the busier intersection in Prescott. I stand outside and I have a cigarette multiple times a day, and I can't tell you how many times people rolling stops, blow through the stop sign completely on James Street, the amount of speed coming up Center Street, and that's just side streets that are at 40, and I know Edward's 40, but it's 2 lanes. That's just, they put down a children playing sign up, which, I don't think has slowed the traffic any. I've requested a 4-way stop there in the past and it hasn't happened, but I guess that's my concern, is that whose child is it going to be that's walking down the sidewalk on Edward Street when someone's trying to rush to make a left into that building? Whose child is it going to be? That's you see it on the Facebook page. It's just in town here, people complaining. We've got the local police lady yelling at people to slow down for kids getting picked up by bus stops. And that's what I mean. A nurse, a PSW flying into the parking lot because she's late for a shift or late for, or whatnot. That's just my concern. And if it's not felt, then it's not felt. But I just figure as a parent, I need to bring it up. That's, can you put a price on a child's life? That's it, walking down the sidewalk.
Madam Chair, do we know, or has there been a study, the current high school dismisses at X time? Do we know if the shift changes currently at Wellington, will there be different shift changes, 12-hour, 8-hour shifts? Because I think that'll play a major role.
That would probably help.
If we knew that the shift changes were not going to be occurring within half an hour of the school being let out, because you're right, there's an abundant amount of students walking down that sidewalk. And if we could time it where the shift changes weren't during that time, that would help a lot, I would think, for sure. I don't know if that's been considered or not, whether you're doing 8 or 12. My wife's in healthcare, so I kind of understand the shift changes are a big factor.
And we have 3 shifts, and that obviously it's a 24-hour operation. So the shift changes would be occurring. They're 8-hour blocks. So the shift change, if I believe correctly, and it's around 7 a.m. And then 8 hours later. So it should miss the 3 o'clock, the exit from the school. We can confirm that with our operations team. We're the development arm for Riverdale Living. Riverdale Living is the operator of the home. And so we can pass along that information. We'll confirm with our VP of operations to confirm what the shift changes will be for this location.
The other thing to consider is that if you're going to run everyone up Montgomery or Alexander, those same individuals that are on Edward Street would be going down to Churchill and potentially going down, heading to the east. So whether you encounter them on Edward Street or you then are starting to encounter them on much more residential streets, without a doubt, Alexander and Montgomery are much, much smaller streets and much more difficult to navigate than Edward.
Chair, adding to that, has there ever been consideration then having an exit and entrance timing. So you only use, say, Montgomery for exiting or entering, or same with Edward. Just because when you have flow, I know at St. Lawrence Lodge, it's a nightmare trying to get out onto Highway 2 when the staff change is happening. Sometimes there's lineups of 10 cars just to get out, you know, so maybe if there was an option to have one entering, going in one way and exiting, possibly.
Mr. Burton.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's something to consider is there's no sidewalks on those streets that we're talking about, right? So that is another issue for children and for young adults. I think I'm a mother as well. I have adult children now, but they did the same sidewalks, right? So it's also, I think, on the parents and teachers and stuff to educate the kids and make sure that their safety, right? Their safety is first and paying attention. Sometimes they're doing this and you're right. And sometimes the PSWs and nurses are late for their shift, but that I think is out of our control at this point in time. I think the entrance off of Edward Street is an excellent idea because you're talking about easy access for the fire trucks, because that is important as well. Right? So, thank you.
Any other?
That's the only.
Actually, Madam Chair, how many handicap parking spots? Maybe it's in here. I apologize if I missed it.
3, I believe.
Just 3? Okay.
And Madam Chair, like, I think, you know, we just came back from Toronto, which is just a zoo, right? People and I understand what you're saying. Like, I use the same reference when people ask me about raising the speed limit from 40 back to 50, right? And I say it's safety. And they go, well, you know, how many accidents have there been? I said, 1 is too many. So I understand what you're saying. But I think a lot of times it's hard for us to protect the people. Like, I shouldn't say it that way, but it's hard for us to determine things like that because of someone's bad driving or someone's in a rush to get to work and they hit somebody. I don't think that's our fault if that happens. You know, now we can educate, we can put stop signs, we can put lights. We're doing all that as a council. Trying to make it better. But I understand your concern, but I think this is, you know, like they said, they're adding 68 beds to a community or to an area that really needs 68 more beds. But, you know, if we can make it safer, let's make it that way. And, you know, like Councillor Burton says, the kids have to be aware too. You know, you just can't cross the street and not look both ways. You know, that's a little bit of the onus is on them as well.
Any other discussion? Could I just ask, where are you at with the construction phasing plan? Like deciding how the contractors and staff are going to come and go?
So we have, I believe you established an agreement with the Upper Canada District School Board and secured a number of spaces there. There's an empty lot across the street that they're willing to have a parking lot established there. And then we're working with the property owners of the beer store as well as the it's all owned by the same property owner all the way down to Giant Tiger, working with them as well to try to establish some parking a lot there. So really that's kind of our focus, to try and keep it off the streets as much as possible and in designated areas.
Okay. Anything else from anyone? No?
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I may. I'm just looking, the print is so small. How big is the courtyard going to be?
The courtyard's roughly about, probably about 30 by 50, give or take, size-wise. And so we're heavily regulated by the Ministry of Long-Term Care. And even when it comes to the building design and the amenities that we provide our residents, And one of them is a controlled outdoor space. And that's why we do have the courtyard, because it's a way for us to control access. It also helps us get additional light into the building. Instead of having it a solid block where we'd only have windows on the perimeter, we're able to have light coming in from the interior courtyard as well. There's also outdoor balconies that face inwards to the courtyard for residents' use that are adjacent to resident lounges.
That's great. Sounds really good. Green space is so important. Definitely. Thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, I will now ask all in favor. Motion carried. Number 7, new business. Does anyone have any new business they'd like to bring forward?
Just as an update, one of the things that we're looking at for next month is have another meeting to talk about the community improvement plan. So we're required to have a public meeting when we're contemplating changes to the community improvement plan. So we will reach out in the next couple of days, probably towards the end of the month, because we do have to have a minimum number of days that we posted before that meeting. You will receive some information on what the changes are, and so that we can have a fulsome discussion of that.
Thank you. Number 8, there are no questions from the media, since there's no media here. Number 9, adjournment. I have a recommendation that the Planning Advisory Committee meeting be adjourned, and the time is, 5:58? Do I have a mover and seconder? Geez. Seconder? Mayor Shankar? All in favor? Thank you, everyone, and thanks to our guests. I think they're.
Yes.